It's a high-tech conversation
and a low-tech topic.
live on the World Wide Web via Zoom. Bench Talk 101.
Welcome everybody to this week's episode of Bench Talk 101. This is going to actually be the last one of 2020 because next week we've got Christmas Eve and then the week after it's New Year's Eve. So this will be it. So I'm trying to get a bit of festiveness behind me, and hopefully we'll have some festive puns throughout tonight's session. It's good to see some new people on here. So welcome to Bench Talk. Best way to view this for the new people is to have it in gallery view. Have it in speaker view, which will then you'll be able to see the speaker in full and look at what they're showing. I know that our speaker tonight has got a slideshow for us, and they've done a bit of a rehearsal, and it's only two and a half hours long. So
3
hours.
If I hurry.
So
if I hurry.
Everybody is charged with their bench beverages. So we'll start a cheers because this is a festive one. So I think we can have a couple more beverages today. So cheers to the bench for our bench beverages. And then I'm going to pass you over in a minute to Derek, but I just want you to ponder whilst we hear our guest speaker and we hear the questions. And the pondering is on where we're going to go with Bench Talk 101 in 2021. I've got some ideas I'd like to share them with you, but you are the members. This is your show, so you kind of need to tell me what you want to do. So have a think about that, and hopefully we can have a good discussion later tonight to see where we're going in 2021. But this is the 33rd talk in consecutive weeks. Okay, we haven't had a break. My wife is going, yes, they've got a break for 2 weeks, but that's kind of that's where we're at. So all about COVID, all about helping other people and creating a community where we can look after each other, but we can talk about what we love. We can talk about the skills, the expertise, the knowledge, and share that with everybody. And I tell you what, I have learned so much from you guys. It's been absolutely amazing. And then, of course, we've got the after party every week, which is Shrenik and his Merry Men. And the after party goes on late. I think his record is something like 4 or 5 o'clock in the morning. So be welcome, to join that one as well. Anyway, that's it from myself. Over to Derek, who's going to introduce our guest speaker. Derek.
Yeah, thank you, Geoffrey. Yes, that's right. Tonight, 33 weeks on the trot. Who would have thought that when we started back in May? So tonight's speaker is something of a legend among the Bench Talk 101 family here. His first appearance was our very first episode back in May, when he kept us informed for more than an hour, as I recall, on the subject of staircase saws. Looking at our audience, though, this evening, it's about 8:30 p.m. here in the UK, and I can see an introduction is not strictly necessary because we're all sort of familiar with one another. So instead, I thought I'd tell you a story that happened to me a few years ago on the way back from the pub after a hard day's work building anarchist tool chests with a certain woodworker from Kentucky. It came to everyone's attention in the party as we sort of ambled our way down the sort of cobbled streets that my knowledge of woodworking legends was woefully inadequate, as I hadn't heard of, wait for it, Roy Underhill. The name meant nothing to me. And so to make their point and to try and sort of help me out to bring me up to speed, they used a tactic which I sort of felt sure was dumbing down just for my benefit. And they decided to use rock icons to make their point. So they said, look at it this way, Derek. And one of them said that if Chris Schwartz is the Jimi Hendricks of woodworking, then think of Roy Underhill as the Elvis. And I guess it kind of made sense, I think, which means tonight's speaker is either Miles Davis or Bob Dylan. Think about it. Whoever it is, give them a warm welcome and prepare to be entertained. So speaker, reveal yourself.
Hi, everybody. Yes, thank you, Derek. I appreciate that. Actually, I'm the Jimi Hendricks of woodworking. And thank you very much, guys, for taking 10 minutes of my 3 hours. That's very appreciated. I hear on the social media that I've actually, that you've been passing the word around that we've got a very special guest speaker tonight. And he couldn't make it, so you got me. So I just want to do a bit of the political stuff because, Geoffrey normally tells the rest of the world what's going on in Britain. And this week, we're fast approaching Brexit. And Boris popped over to see Ursula, his mate, over in Europe, to do a bit of negotiating, last minute trade deals. And she wouldn't have anything of it. She even served him fish for dinner. How can you believe that? So on the way back, he popped into Belgium, and he's done the very first trade deal with the Belgians, Matthias. Apparently, we get an infinite supply of Belgian beer in return for unlimited jelly deals. So I think you've done well there, mate. That's perfect. So I don't think any of the Americans are going to get that joke at all, but there you go. I'm glad you got it, Derek. I'll just go to share now to do now you'll have to put up with this because I don't know if this is going to work. We hope it does. Look how primitive we are. Oh, blimey, it came up eventually. God, that was a bit of a panic. Okay, so I was asked to do a talk this week about tool making and how I started out in tool making. And I sat down and I thought to myself, do you know what? I haven't got a clue, because it just suddenly appeared. And I thought, what influences did I have to make me go down this route, this thankless task that I do to try to make tools? And it dawned on me that back in the 70s, that was back in the last century, I went to college, and this was where I went to college, on this beach, which is absolutely fantastic. It was for 18 months, and they taught me everything I needed to know to be stuck on a desert island in the middle of nowhere and be able to do anything I could possibly need to do without any shops or spare parts or anything. And that was going on quite well for about 9 months. And then the vintage car you see, I cannot believe it's a vintage car. The vintage car you see here, this Ford Escort at the bottom there, I was a passenger in that when a drunken driver came around a corner in the middle of the streets in Penzance, where the pirates come from. And head-on collision, 20 miles an hour, 6 months in hospital, and came out with one eye and about 100 and something stitches in my face, and ended up on the beach, that beach, for 6 months convalescing. What a shame that was. So I was told, well, you're supposed to do 18 months. You've missed 6 months of it. You're going to have to start again. So I had to wait for another 6 months for the new course to start. And they put me in the machine workshop. And I was apparently in charge of looking after people doing what my group was supposed to be doing, which was really strange. But it was learning how to use every single tool possible in a machine shop. And back in those days, we didn't have any sort of pussyfooting around. You had to make something to prove that you could use every tool. And that was what you see in the bottom right-hand corner there, a brass block. And that, you think, oh my God, what a pointless waste of time that is. Making a brass block, what can I use it for? Do you know, I think I've still got it somewhere in the loft. It is my pride of possession, because it has to be exactly 1 inch cube. It has to be exactly 90 degrees on every corner, and every face has to be flat and perfect to within microns. And it has to be done with hand tools. And I think that was my third or fourth attempt, 3 of which went in the bin because they were past the point of no return, as it were. So everybody did it, everybody made one, and everybody went away, even then, thinking what a waste of time that was. And that was my first and only introduction into anything to do with making anything from metal or wood or anything. And then I thought, where did I get any woodworking stuff from? And then I realized that 10 years later, I started green woodworking. And here you see me on the left here. I had Indian Ocean fish tapeworm. Took me down to 7.5 stone, would you believe? That's how I can get into those. Don't even go there. But I knew how to sharpen tools. I had to, because the green woodworking we were doing at the time required that you hang from a piece of rope suspended from the bottom of a helicopter and slice your way through some jungle, which you can see there. So that's my green woodworking experience. Needless to say, I didn't keep up green woodworking for much longer after that. So the later influences, and this is where all the serious stuff starts. There's a load of people here. If you're not on this list, it's not because I've forgotten about you. It's because I just ran out of space. But there are very many here. Just very quickly, two people from ancient history. Up the top left, you see there, Holtzapfel. I've mentioned him in my last presentation. John Jacob Holtzapfel, my main influence in the making of anything extraordinary. He was a major influence on me and still is and will be forever, I think. Bottom right, you see the even older Galileo. We'll show you later on why that influenced me. I accidentally decided that I might try to take on his genius, and that was a complete and utter experience. Very many books that I've read before the internet really took off, and magazines and things through the years. People like Megan Fitzpatrick has influenced me greatly. I wouldn't be able to use any of the tools I use now without Ron Hock down in the bottom there in the bottom left-hand corner. He was, if you haven't got the Perfect Edge book, you should get it, because at that point was my eureka moment in sharpening. It is the Bible for me. Of course, Bill and Sarah have got to be there. Bill was a major influence on me early days when Sarah was making their first website, creating their book for Little Billy making. Another book people need to get if they're ever going to get into plane making, because if you can make a Little Billy, then you can make any plane, basically. And obviously people that have been on here, Shane Skelton, you've seen the saws he makes. I aspire to be as precise as him, and Ollie Sparks just below him, both of whom are the epitome of, I suppose people call it OCD. It's not, it's perfection, and they really strive for perfection. And every time I try and catch up with them, they disappear off into another zone and go another step further. And last but not least on this, penultimate on this page, you have Richard there, Richard Arnold, who's done a few presentations on Bench Talk. God bless him. A humble gentleman. Him and his wife Kate run the annual auction up in Market Harborough for the cancer nurses. A genuine guy, knows everything you want to know about everything and will answer every question you've got. So tremendous guy. And there in the middle is the back of Jane Rees. She cured my insomnia. I read British Planemakers 3 from cover to cover, and I guarantee that every single couple of pages I fell asleep sound and safe. So Jane is there talking to Richard and looking at on her phone. She's not ignoring Richard. She's looking at British Planemakers 4, which you can now get quite cheaply. It's a must for any plane aspiring plane collector, maker, or user of moulding planes from Great Britain from the 1700s. It's an amazing book. And finally, top right, my influence is my daughter, who really looks at everything I do. Nobody else does. And she is a great critic of all my work. And there she is. I think she's got a Miller's Falls drill. It probably isn't at Stanley. It's got to be a Miller's Falls drill, making a log store for her cottage. So those are the influences. Now, going back to when did I really start again? I think that was around about 2009, I believe. And having seen Bill's website and being inspired by infill planes, I took it upon myself to make an infill plane. I certainly couldn't afford one at the time. And so I made an infill plane. I think it was from a Galoot website. And if I remember right, it was Derek Cohen who encouraged people to get any old plane and turn it into an infill. And I thought that was great. And Derek has been a good buddy ever since. But this was, as you can see, a complete and utter monster. This is a 110 Stanley body. It doesn't even have any of the other bits in it. It was just found at a boot fair for 20p or something. And I cut everything off it inside and wasted, shall we say, some mahogany. And you can tell I didn't know what I was doing because I've got a lever cap and a wedge in there, which is, looking at it, amazing. I think I got the lever cap from somewhere on eBay or from even Bristol Designs or somewhere, and it wasn't wide. It was too wide, so I had to cut it down, and that's why it looked so ungainly. And you live and learn. So that was my first tool making experience. Horrible, absolutely horrible. I'm ashamed. I sold it though at a boot fair a few years later for 80 quid. So not all bad, eh? So we're on to my second infill plane, and this is Richard. A little bit of an improvement on the first one. And we used to meet up, and Andy, you'll probably correct me later on, because up the top left, you'll see what we call the Reservoir Dogs photograph of us, all of our mates together. Richard's somewhere in the background, probably talking to somebody at Mac Timbers in Northamptonshire. And we'd regularly meet up there on their open day with Bill, Andy Brown, Andy Tools and Tack, Andy Tuckwell, myself, Richard Tomes, who you see there in the barber coat, and myself and his partner Emma. Now, he was very significant because he and I got on very well together. He's got a wicked sense of humor about almost anything weird, and he was a major brilliant cartoonist for a national newspaper. He also, what he didn't know about using a hammer and an anvil for forge work was, it's not worth writing about. He was a brilliant blacksmith, and he made some holdfasts for a lot of us. I know Richard's got one or two, I've got one or two, and they are just perfect. He spent a lot of time working on such a simple tool to make it absolutely perfect. So we'd regularly go to this event at Mac Timbers every year, and it became a kind of an unwritten rule that everyone brought something for someone. So you'd bring an obscure tool or something you thought somebody could be, make use of, like a special giant turn screw or a chisel or something like that. We'd pass them around to each other. So on this particular day, Richard leant into the back of his car and produced what you see on the bottom left there, which is at the infill part of the metal part of the infill plane. And he said, I made two of these because it was just as easy to make two. I've got one for myself, which I'm going to fill in, and one for you. You do all the wood bits, I'll help you with the metal bits, and off we go. So I did. I couldn't believe it. It was a dream come true for me. And for the next year, I really didn't think I could do it justice. And I made templates, and I fiddled with it, and I played with it, and we talked about it on the UK Woodworking Forum, which was a precursor to the Unplugged Woodworker group. And finally, I was ready to go ahead and do it early 2014. And sadly, overnight in May, we got the sad news that Richard had died suddenly of a brain aneurysm, and tragically. So I didn't know what to do. None of us did. We were all quite badly affected by that because he was very much part of our community. And so I got in touch with Emma, his partner, just to obviously offer condolences, etc., and say, look, I've got this plain body that he gave. Do you want it back? I don't know whether I should do anything with it. And she turned around and said, no, I want you to carry on and make it. So I said, oh, okay, if that's what you want, that's what I'll do. But it put me in a situation where I first of all had to do it justice, and secondly, I just had to re-educate myself on metalworking, because all the rest of the bits that he was going to do, I had to now do. And you can see there, the blade, the iron, and the cap iron were handmade, and as was the lever cap and the knob. And it pushed some barriers for me to. But I realised that brass block, all those years before, was fundamentally me being able to do that. So it was finally done. We took it down to another Mac Timbers event, and it was a joy to see Emma using it for the first time, and I was really proud at that moment. Subsequent to that, a lot of people said, well, look, you're going to need to look after it, put it in a box or something. Everybody wants me to make boxes. I don't know why. So there you see above the top is a little mini Richard in inlay, and the inlay in that is exactly the same materials used in the plane itself: steel, the burr oak for the infills, and the brass for the lever cap. It's all exactly the same materials. In fact, it's offcuts from those materials, except for the steel. And that's my probably one and only attempt at anything remotely associated with furniture. So that's Richard. Other earlier tools around about that time, usually I end up, because at that time I hadn't received the enormous pension that I get now from the company I work for. Joking, very much joking. And I had to use whatever I could find. And I think it made me look at things in a different light. I realized quite early on that I wanted to use expensive woods, i.e. exotic woods, or woods that would normally be considered for special purposes. And I did that because I knew that I always take so long to actually make anything that by the time I've made it, if it's made of decent wood, it's worth more to me than the labor is more expensive than the actual material. So I tend to use boxwood as my exotic English wood. I use ebonies, I use lignum vitae, and various other woods of that nature. And here you see examples of that. But when I make something, I usually keep all the offcut. I definitely keep all the off. I've got a big box marked box on it, which looks a bit fun. Everybody keeps laughing when they see it, but it's got box in it. You see what I mean? So on the top left-hand corner, you see this is a graver for engraving. Another thing I'm trying to get into, from a design from the Victorian period from New York, and I couldn't afford them. They were very expensive, so I made one. That's in boxwood and brass with the graver steel from tool steel. And next to that, going clockwise round, just a couple of offcuts from boxwood, which were turned into dividers and a square, which you can put any connotation you like upon, up to you. And these are ebony and boxwood. And again, offcuts from plane making and that sort of thing. I think they came from one of the smoothers, the ebony and boxwood smoother that I made. Further round, you see, this is a slight deviation into some yew that I was given. And this I call my two fingers saw, which is a tribute to the French back in the days when we used to fire arrows at them and get them all the time because they went much further, because our bows were yew, and therefore every time they captured the archers, they were allegedly, all part of myth, cut their fingers off to stop them from firing their bows at them. And so those archers that were still in the army and still fighting the French used to stick their two fingers up to say, I've still got them and I'm still going to kill you. So this was my tribute to the French, part of Brexit. And it is made of yew, and it's made of the transition between the heartwood and the softwood, the sapwood, where one is elastic and the other one can be compressed, so that the strain of the actual twine and the blade is better served in a smaller width. That's the theory. It's probably utter rubbish, but it looks good. Round further down, you see some bowling balls, and this is bowling as in England, as in boring old men standing with pipes on a village green rather than on 10-pin bowling. And the old bowling balls were made, or bowls, I stand correct myself, the bowls were made of lignum vitae, the wood, the famous wood that sinks, that's used in the Boulder Dam for the hydroelectric bearings. It's used on the tail end by the propeller for the Queen Mary. It's used on the insulators for the San Francisco earthquake, for all of the trolley cars that were damaged. So it's a fantastic wood. It's insulator, it's waterproof. I cannot glue anything to it. So to get the brass to fix onto it, you use a lot of acetone, a lot of epoxy, and some screws. But you make, this is one I did make two of. I rarely make two of anything, but this is one I did make a few of and gave them away to friends. So that was one of my first marking gauges. And then below that are some winding sticks. Again, this is one I made two of for obvious reasons. And you'll see that they're different on the flags, on the marking winding sticks, you'll see that there's ebony and boxwood. But that's so that when you sight down, they're in opposition to each other. The back one is black, white, and the bottom one is white, black. And when you're looking with any background, if it's a white background, you use the black one. And if it's a black background, use the white one. And you can sight down and see quite clearly when you're out of alignment. So that was just an idea. Again, a bit crazy and probably not as useful as it may seem. Next to that, bog oak, one of my favorite English woods, and it's the only black English wood there is. Bog oak is 5,300 years old oak that fell down in Norfolk, and this I made a box out of with a square that I made for a very good friend who looked after my son in California, and she took it back with her. It's friction fit onto boxwood, little tenons that stick out into the mortises of the lid. Totally friction fit, perfect fit, everything's fine, totally square, everything's beautiful till you take it to California, and then you've got that humidity and the temperature variation, and she couldn't get the lid off for 6 months, but that's fine. Alongside that is a real bowling ball. That's lignum vitae, heart and sapwood. It's very similar in properties from one to the other. So that's what I call my cappuccino mallet, sitting next to two Marples plastic handled chisels that have had the plastic removed and some African blackwood inserted with brass. And they're probably some of the best chisels I've got. It's a superb steel from Marples around about the 50s, 60s, around about the plastic generation. Next to that, some more offcuts, which is a pencil gauge that I created out of bits and pieces from, I think, a jointer or that period. No, it was earlier than the jointer because I used this on the jointer. But this is again, boxwood and ebony with African blackwood inset into brass knobs for both the locking of the stem and for the locking of the pencil, which is a cut down Koh-i-Noor pencil, which is the only brand where the top and the bottom are independent of each other. So you can cut them apart, saw them off, and then stick them back together again to make a mini pencil, which fits in there. And it means you just press the clutch, put a new lead in, off you go. Most useful tool I've got that I've made, that randomly made out of inspiration. And it really is useful, as you'll see later. Above that is a marking gauge. I think that was back in 2010, actually. That was bits of an offcut that I had of Damascus steel, a little knife project, and some brass. So I just made some dovetails joints in to practice come the day that I made infill miters out of the metals, and that ended up as a secret Santa for somebody 1 year. So that's my early tools. Later tools I'll skim over because just a reminder that this year has been the COVID lockdown, so I've been able to get into the head of John Jacob Holt Sapfel. If you need any more information about the gauge that you see at the top left hand corner, those two pictures, this is a cutting gauge that I saw and I just fell in love with. It's a vernier gauge, beautiful thing. Use it all the time in woodworking. It's pretty accurate. I think about 100th of an inch if you use the vernier. But I used it in almost every one of the projects since then. It is a fantastic tool. He was a genius. This is my humble copy of it. And over on the right hand side, you see it's sitting on a drawing for a pair of dividers, which I've just recently finished. You see on my shoulder here, and they're in the bottom left hand corner. These were made, or the originals were made by Rolls-Royce in their machine shop, presumably to show what they could do. And they turned up on Jim Bode's website a couple of months back, and I just went, wow, that's different. That really is. Apparently, and looking at it, I sometimes see the spirit of ecstasy in the wings at the sides, but I think you have to have a bit of an imagination for that. But it works on the original. It had an arc that went 180 degrees off through. Both sides were adjustable, and I just thought, why? So I cut that out. And the left-hand side is a fixed arm, and the right-hand side is the movable arm. But the radius of the arc is a bent square section rod, which is made of brass, 3 millimeters square. and it's bent in such a way that it follows the curvature or the radius of the actual hinge, so that when you move the arm, you unlock it using the locking finial you see there. When you unlock the arm, it is always going to be at 90 degrees to that curve. Yes, there is a slight curvature, but it's like the curvature of the Earth. Its apparent curvature at that point is very little. And because it follows the radius exactly to the, it's a bit of a strange angle that it does actually follow the radius in the circle. It will go all the way out to the end without jamming at all. And it doesn't need any play in the slot that's in the arm. So amazing designs, and something I like to try to emulate. I try to copy what's already been created by different makers. The fine tool art magazine by Nijinsky, or whatever his name is, and I can never remember how to say that. That's a horse, isn't it? Nijinsky, yeah, not him, but you know the one I mean. And Gandor, not Gandor. No, he's out of Lord of the Rings, isn't he? Anyway, you know who I mean. That book, there's a coffee table book of the finest art tools in the world. Well, that's one of my Bibles. And I look at that, David Russell's books, and I look through them at what people created in the past. And there's enough there in terms of beauty and art that you can mix and match, and you can take a bit of something and you can make it into something else. And that's what the bottom right hand, the little hinge you see there is going to become. It's going to be a winged medium-sized divider. The other ones are large. They're about 8.5, 9 inches long. So they're good for large woodworking projects. The originals were dividers. These are pencil. It's got a pencil, so you can make a compasses out of it, but you can also unscrew the right hand arm and change that for a point. So those are the things that I'm doing so far. This year also built the simple lathe by John Jacob Holtzapfel and using that to turn the finials and round things like the finials on the dividers, very tiny little acorns, because I was just reading a book by James Canton called The Oak Papers, which is a great book, and it put me in a really good mood every day. And on the cover was an acorn, and I thought, what a beautiful thing. So I incorporated acorns in that, both at the end of the arc and on the lockdown for the arc. So they'll also be incorporated in the medium dividers, which you can see on the right, but just the hinge for it, and I'll show the ones later on. So I thought I'm about 20 minutes now. I'm about 20 something minutes in, so I'll whiz through this. This is for Shrenick. You see, because he made a table and he called it Jim. And what a nice thing to do. So last week he was talking about, how do I make planes? How do I cut holes for the mouth? How do I do it? So this briefly whiz through. You can see the whole project online on Unplugged Woodworker Group. It's under article collections, Boxwood Jointer, and it's the whole project is there. So if anybody is crazy enough to want to copy it, go ahead. But on the left, you see how we start, or how I start. It is really down to wood selection. And I start with boxwood. Shrenick, I know you've got some boxwood given to you this year for Christmas. Excellent choice. This is the piece that I use for the jointer, and it's a very rare piece. Boxwood in English, Buxus sempervirens, is a bush. So this is a large bush, 300 maybe plus years old. And it's been seasoned for approximately, well, since the 80s. So this was going to be what I was going to make out of this. This was going to need some thinking about, how to use this unique piece of wood for something special. So that's how you start out. And I just mill it by hand. No machines involved. So with Richard to plane and scrub planes and various other things, turning it into what you see on the left-hand side there, which is the billet. That's your finished billet that you're going to start your plane building with. And above it is a previous plane that I made of a similar theme with boxwood and ebony, which is the wedge mouth smoothers we were talking about, which I think might be your best idea, Shrenick, for because you don't have to pay so much attention to the mouth. I say that the wood selection is the first thing you need to do, but it is also infinitely important to, probably more important to know what iron you're going to build this around. There is nothing special about any plane out there, that some perform better than others. They are all just a mechanism for holding a chisel, a right angle, a correct angle, so that you can plane wood. That's it. That's what they did, So this is all it is. This is a very, very refined edge. It's given to me by Ollie Sparks. I think it's 1.5 inches wide, so quite a narrow. Don't forget, I make tools, so everything is downsized. So this jointer is a downsized version of what you would consider to be the standard jointer. But this is a 1.5 inch wide iron with its own cap iron and screw, all made by Ollie in his workshop. So he gave me that, and I thought, right, yet again, I've got something to treasure, that I've got to use on something special. So here you see it alongside the wood, and the wood at this point needs to be marked out. You need to use very precise marking on where you're going to position the iron along the wood, where how whether it's halfway along or slightly forward of that, whether you're going to have a longer end to it than a front. There are very many variations in plane design, and so that's one of your first considerations. And then once you can see on the left there all the complexity of the laying out. So those lines are where the bed is, where the iron is bottom of the iron is likely to be, where the front of the mouth is likely to be, and so on and so forth. And where the width of the iron is, where the abutments are at the top, and so on. So all those lines are laid out beforehand, so you know what you're doing and the angles are all correct, because it's those lines that you're going to need when you do your initial clearance of your waist, open up the mouth. Once you've done that, it's all a matter of refinement. So the most critical stage is opening up that mouth. And I think Phil Edwards, Philly Plains, did a whole lecture, which you can go back and look at on Bench Talk. So I'm not even going to suggest that I'm anywhere close to that ability. So he's the guy to talk to about that, or go and watch his video. But here I've used a mill bit on a drill, and I've gone straight down. Now you see, I mentioned earlier last week, I was trying to describe what a bird's mouth is. The bird's mouth has a flat base to it where you see the holes, and that is actually 90 degrees to the direction of where the mouth is going to be, going up the bed. So it's at 90 degrees to the bed, and that gives you a platform on which to drill into. Otherwise, if you don't cut that out, you're going to have to try to drill down into a 45-degree angle on the wood, and it's just going to slip away. So I use a pilot mill to drill down, to pop out the other side. And the idea is to pop out the other side without going anywhere near the bed. So the other part of the bird's mouth is the wall of the pocket, but it's back from the final point. You see, there's a gap between that line, and this is the line that you drill down against. So you put your drill up against that to drill down, and it's your guide. But obviously you sight down it as well to make sure. But once you've done one, you get an idea. And I've done 5 across here. The critical ones are the 2 on the outside, because they get into the area where you're getting close to the abutments, and you could drill through where you don't really want anything to go missing. This drill that I used here for the final opening up is a gouge bit that is of a type that's got a slew to it. So it's very sharp. It goes down without deviation, because it doesn't get affected by grain direction, knots, or anything. It just goes straight through. It's slow. You use it with a brace, but what comes out are these little maggots of wood, quite beautiful things. And you just do it, take your time, because you're really trying just to keep in that tiny space that is your mouth. And the idea is to go on your bottom right there, to come out so that your iron lies on the bed and comes out up against. That's almost finished, that shot there. It's just, as you can see, it's just a couple of thou off being an open mouth. if you go to the top of the plane itself, Shrenik, you'll see the abutments. It says 53 degrees. That's because it's a 45-degree bed plus 8 degrees. 53 degrees is where the top of the wedge is. So again, you're trying to edge up to it by shaving away, and between, you're shaving away the waste from in front of the mouth area of the pocket, which is the wear, or where the wear is going to be. On the top, just it wouldn't fit on the other page, but this is part of that description. This is where I got a tip from Ollie Sparks. I said, how do you know when your abutments are even? Because if your abutments are not even, you cannot tune the wedge to fit the pocket. Because if they're out of kilter, i.e. one is further, is a lower angle than the other, then the wedge will automatically not fit. It will fit on one side and not the other, so it will go in skewed or worse. So the important thing here is to have the abutments to the bed at the same angle, equally. And you just use this mini wedge here like this, which does two purposes. The datum line that you see on that there, this wedge is at 8 degrees. The datum line is what you draw across it when you've made one of the abutments rough to the point that you're happy with it, that it's straight along the line that you've drawn. You then draw that datum line, and that is the datum line that the other one must be matched to. So you'll be shaving the other one second and keep checking until that line, when you tap the wedge in, that line matches when you move it across to the other side. And that's how you balance the abutments. That's how I do it, and that's how Ollie mentioned to me the easiest way to do it. And then once you've done that, your iron fits. I'm assuming your bed is now coplanar with the sole and no skew to it. So that's a given, and it comes out at the right place at the mouth, and your abutments are now perfect. And now it's just a case of putting the iron in and then making a wedge, which you then shape and tune to fit properly with smoking it in. That's too long to explain here, but you get the idea. So it's precision. And these are the key points that you make. The rest of it is just tarting it up afterwards, making it look good. Over on the right, we see a sequence of photographs which relate to the actual creation of the tote in America, or the handle if you're in Britain. And this is from a Gabriel rescue. It's kind of like a poor old manky dog that you see on the street and you take home because you feel sorry for it. But it's a Gabriel jointer, and it's pretty rare to get bench planes from the 18th century, end of the 18th century. And this one was abused, as you can see, by whoever had it. It got wet, it got wet rot, it got woodworm, it got everything, you know, but the handle's beautiful. And so I copied the handle, and as you can see, you've got a progression there of the same handle. Interestingly, wood selection again, top right hand corner, you'll see that I chose a piece of the only piece I could find of boxwood that was wide enough, long enough, and high enough to make a handle. And that was the only piece that had a sodding great knot in it. So I thought, hang on a minute, that knot's about the same size as the hole that I'm going to make in the handle. So I managed to get the handle orientated such that, template orientated such that it circulated the knot. And that had an amazing byproduct, in as much as all the grain strength is circulating around that knot as well. So if you see one below it, you'll see that the grain flows in almost a hurricane around the eye. And that proved to be very helpful, because it meant you could get really quite thin in places, which you can see. I made the horn oversized to cut it down. That's what it would have been at the top there on the Gabriel, but everybody said don't cut it down. So it became part of it, and you can see there on the bottom exactly how exaggerated it is. The other thing I find important in tool making is using tools that I really feel joy to use. The most you can afford, given that they are inherently more useful, like the new concept saw over there, absolute godsend, game changer. Over on the right, you see me using that panel gauge, that tiny little pencil gauge, to make the meridian line, to put the line down for the center of where the handle is going to go. So that has the ability to be able to be rotated around the curve while still long enough to stay registered against the left-hand side of the body itself. So very useful. And on the bottom left, you see the scraper planes that I use, the scraper card scrapers, sorry, that I use to scrape finish off things like the chamfers and so on and so forth. So very useful. Bottom right is fundamentally the most important part that you get to at this stage, is the lapping of the sole. In any plane, when you lap the sole, you're attempting to bring 3 points into the same level. So the toe, the front of the mouth, and the heel have to be in the same plane or coplanar. The rest of it, as long as it's not higher, it's fine. And indeed, the Japanese deliberately cut away those areas in their dies, their plane bodies, so that they have no friction at that point. But those are the 3 critical points. On a jointer, I like to do it right the way across because it's inherently going to wobble over things. And here we see that the next thing you do when you've finished all of that is you test it. And okay, this is showing off, but this is a test of this jointer in real time. On the left, you see I've written very fine in anticipation in pencil on a piece of wood, pine, I think it was, crappy old pine. And then I've planed it. And on the right, you see the shaving. And if you're if your screen is very good, you'll see it still says very fine on the piece of wood that I've just shaved. That to me, I say is showboating, but it actually tells me what's going on, and it tells me don't bother with anything else. That's perfect. Bit of comedy here. I then put it in linseed oil and left it out in the sun wrong, and I thought, oh, you know, I've left it, and the sun came out, and anyway, so I had to tune it all again. But I was then testing it for after all of that, because it could move with any finishing on the plain body. It can move after the event, so you might need to relap it at some point down as it moves, as it stabilizes, particularly with this particular one, which is a raisy design, i.e. the back is down and the handle sits lower than the top. Because you've cut away that amount of wood, it is inherently less wood, and therefore it has a tendency to warp in that direction. So things to watch out for. It might look fancy, but it's a pain in the ass. Anyway, so on the left-hand side is a cool shaving I first took. I was taking a video of this, and you can go and look on my YouTube channel. And this is a plain shaving from cool shaving, and whoosh, across it came, and it just stayed up in the air like that. So I thought, okay, I'll take a photograph of that, because that ain't going to happen again. And it didn't. And so if nobody believes me, I did not stick a wire behind it. An amazing shot. And that's a cool shaving. And then I go from that point to the very fine. And I call that final test the waterfall test. And you can see why. It has to be translucent. It has to flow consistent right across the piece of wood that you're cutting, so you get the full width, and the thickness has to be consistent as well within it. And if it ripples and looks like a waterfall, well, all well and good. So that's a summary of that particular story of that plane. And there's some shots of it out in the sunshine some months afterwards, when it's attained what Bill and I love about boxwood. It attains that maturity that no other wood does when it gets older and older and more ultraviolets. No other, I mean, you know, different colored woods, you wouldn't get that. The fact that it starts off plain Jane and ends up a swan. And below that, just a little bit of a shot of the museum, what I call the valuables cabinet. This is the boxwood section. And you see a couple of my planes there, that jointer on the left, one of my wedge mouth smoothers. Next to that, one that I'm absolutely sure that Stephen Prey would recognize. It's the amazing low angle boxwood mitre plane from Ollie Sparks. Another one of mine, a mitre plane that I made earlier. And 2 Bill Carter planes taking up the right hand side there. And there you see little Billy. You can buy a book and make him. And if you do, you'll be well on the way to making planes. So just to nearly finish off, I think I'm almost running out of time, and I don't want to take up too much time, but this is the most challenging tool that I've done, without doubt. Galileo set me off. Richard is a co-conspirator. He sent me this book, and it's from the museum in Florence, It is a plum square by Galileo, and it is, I just looked at it, I thought that is beautiful, and it's about as simple as any other tool in there, and I reckon I could possibly make it. How crazy was I? It folds up. The top has to be exactly 90 degrees. The arms have got to be exactly straight when it's open and exactly fold into those rebates when it's not. The bit that hangs down with the plumb bob on it has to be exactly at 45 degrees, and because they number it 0 to 90 across. Don't ask me why. It's to do with cannons. And then the feet have to be flat on the surface perfectly when it's fully open. Apart from that, it's pretty easy. And the box went with it because I gave this to Richard for the charity auction in 2019 to make some money for the cancer nurses. And a lovely young lady bought it for £1,100. So that was great thing. And there you see it from the front. And the book, that book, which I haven't picked it up since. I didn't. My favorite tool, the one I mentioned earlier, in memory of Richard. It's called Richard. It's in memory of Richard Tomes, great man. And that's sitting on its own box that hasn't been made into that box yet. That's the solid walnut from England that was sawn up to use as a veneer for the sides and back. And a tin of Alfie Shine. What would we be without Alfie Shine? I'll get your tin for Christmas today. Quick look at what's coming for next year. I know that Geoffrey was talking about it. Put your mind also, for the first 3 months, I will be making an announcement along with Richard about what we're going to do next year. These are the sort of tools that I made for various years. I think Chester will see the bottom right, his favorite little set of French curves. Then in the middle, a staircase saw that is the subject of the very first bench talk, and I won't go into that. The Galileo Plum Square and Helen, who is in charge of the London School of Furniture Making, and that now resides there. I've got some news about that for the new year, and the collection of the Motley Crew up the top there. And probably what makes it really, really great for all of us is the thank yous that we get. Richard's not listed on that thank you from the nurses, but it's because he was too modest to tell them. And but I'll tell you, he's functionally the most important person that has been doing that event for 6 years now. It's 6-year anniversary of this year. Right in the middle of the very first one I made, which was a mallet out of a lignum bead-eye bowling ball with some, I think, willow or maybe holly. Made it and nobody wanted it, so Richard bought it. God bless it. Shameless promotion before you go. You thought you were going to get away with it. If you want your bench beverage to come out in an Alfie mug and you're not doing any tool work, which you shouldn't be, you need one of these mugs or a KT Tools calendar, because these are both launched today. And if you want one, just give us a shout, or I'll put a link in the chat later. These are available, and all the proceeds will be going fed back into a new launch of a new project next year between me and another person on this Zoom call who remain nameless, and we're getting together to start launching KT TV, and it will have projects from all abilities, and I can guarantee there's going to be a huge amount of interest from what we've been talking about so far. So getting these for your stocking fillers or the one you love. Don't forget, it's all about the shaving, the waterfall. My mate used to say rubbish, and I say it's about the waterfall and the wood. So with that, any questions? Get rid of this presentation for me, mate. I have no idea how to do it.
Oh, dear. There we go. Well, I mean, fantastic, Jim. I'm going to raise a glass at the start of this one. Bench beverages up for Jim there. That's brilliant. I didn't
think I'd be able to pack it all in. That was 3 hours earlier. So what have I done?
Well, you've done a great job, and what's really good is that you can really see the progress over the years. You can see how you're refining things now, and the quality of the stuff you're making now. I mean, in the early days it was great, but now it's just out of this world, and it's it's just great every time we look on the social media and we see what you're up to, and it's just like the level of detail that you're going into is just, you know, out of this world. I just wish I had time to read and digest your posts, you know, more. But the fact of having time to even have a go at it. So, you know, listening to you, your KTTV and projects like that going through there, that will be brilliant. It will be brilliant. And count me in for your calendar and your mug. Put me down on the list, definitely.
I'll send you the link in the chat, and I'll send everybody a link to you can distribute it if you wish. But everything is going straight back into and more, you know, because it's gonna be quite an enterprise. But yes, it's gonna be fun, and I think it's going to take off a big start. And I want to link it to Bench Talk so that we can come and chat on here. You know, after we've done bits of the project, it will be from anything from a very, very, very new person with no experience whatsoever up to the very finest craftsman. So yeah.
That's no way to talk about Shrenik. You can't talk about
him. I know. We had to include him, you know, especially.
Anyway, look, and I tell you what, Rusty was in there within the first 30 seconds of the talk starting. So here we are for questions. Rusty, off you go.
Thank you. Jim, thank you so much for the presentation. I should start by saying, you can hear me, right?
Yep.
Okay. I should start by saying that I've learned so much from you on Facebook and speaking to you. I'm very grateful for all the education.
Thank you.
What I want to ask you about is not the tools you talked about today. I want to ask you about the museum and Katie tools. I know that it was getting close to being open to public before the COVID started. Assuming that COVID is over this summer, what's the plan there?
Well, the idea was, first of all, the buildings. Now, I'm sitting in building number 1, which was one of 2. This actually is the smaller of the 2. And in it is crammed every single artifact that I've ever collected over the last 10 years. It's only really been collected in the last 10 years. And there are probably upwards of 500-600 planes, molding planes. There's probably an equal number of artifacts of various different types. There's probably 3 or 4 dozen saws from the 17th century up till modern day, and so on. So all of that is crammed into this space, which is why whenever you see me, I'm huddled like this, because if you ever pan the camera around, you'll see all of the what's encroaching on my personal space. In fact, if any of these tools have got COVID, I'm dead. Yeah, because it's like, you know, within 2 meters of me. But the idea was that this was going to go to be almost like the workshop for the second building, which would have been the main museum. And this would then be joined to the second building. They're both log cabins, and the whole L shape would then have where the open part of the L would be a forge, and all of the things you get when you bang things against anvils, and making things like a foundry, and so on in the open in the winter to keep me warm. And that would be also covered over with glass so that the rain didn't get to it. But you could also put glass up. So effectively, you're talking about quite a large, you know, area. And all the tools that are currently in here would be displayed in the new larger workshop. It's about 50% larger extra, so it would spread out. And this would then become the media center for the TV studio, which would have, I mean, I've got all the stuff. And then if we can tilt up already, microphones and cameras and stuff like that. But I started this back in, let me say, it was probably back in 2018, and I started buying all the equipment and the cameras, and the technology in 2 years it's gone through the roof, particularly with Zoom. So as a consequence of that, I'm rethinking on the cameras. The ones that I bought will be used for periphery, but I wanted to make it, because I think COVID's lockdown has taught us so much about TV production, content production, YouTube and that sort of thing. You look at what Mitch does, you look at what, and just your average Joe on the street is becoming some sort of film star. So I think the quality that the kids come up with their technology and so on and so forth. So there's going to be a lot of replanning for what is the media center. The second part of the media center was going to be a Chesterfield leather couch for interviews and with a coffee machine, which is mandatory. Obviously, espresso, bean to cup. And you could have interviews with people. And also in that room as a backdrop will be all of the archive paperwork. I've got a first edition Moxon papers. I've got maps and artifacts from all over the world that I want to put on display and be available. And of course, in virtual terms, there would be things like KTTV productions, live and recorded. It's all recorded, bits like Bench Talk, really, and so on and so forth. The plans were to build the second building in the summer of 2020. But obviously, things went crazy, so couldn't build it, and nobody would come and build it anyway, so on and so forth. So it's been put on the back boiler. But the plan is, it's not a museum that you, in the true sense, where you go and you walk in and wander around with groups of people in strange tourist outfits and stuff like that. It's, you phone up, say, I'm coming to visit Kent, come over, and you spend the day with that person. So it's kind of like and they take the opportunity to interview them and do, whatever, and do a little bit of promo for the museum. But yeah, that's the plan in a nutshell.
And so hopefully, how far away are you from starting to bring people in?
At the moment, anybody can come after. As soon as the vaccine kicks off, and I've had the vaccine, and everyone around, because I wouldn't want to bring anybody into Kent at the moment. We've got a massively high rate of contamination out in zombie land, mostly perpetuated by people not taking any notice. But after all that's done and we're back to relative normality, and I can't see it being much. I'm hoping it'll be this summer, but certainly anyone can come and visit in the mess that it's in now. And, it gives me an opportunity to clear it up every so often. But people have visited already, signed the visitors book, got all that sort of stuff. Donated tools are all recorded in the proper fashion and so on.
Awesome. Thank you.
No problem. Thanks, mate.
Sounds really interesting. I'm looking forward to it all, Jim. Okay, next question up is Lord Captain Sir Major Purple Heart, Jim's favourite wood.
Sorry, I had to do that. Thank you very much, Jim, for the mention and remembering my questions I've posed to you and probably to a few others as well around playmaking. And my question is actually around playmaking, and it's would you think that it's actually easier to start off on a smaller plane? I mean, you started off almost from scratch in terms of playmaking, and you don't make them professionally or anything like that, although you could call it professional in the way that you go about doing things. But would you say that it's easier to start off with a large plane or a small plane?
I'm going to be evil and say that you couldn't do far worse than getting Bill and Sarah's book on making a little Billy and getting your box with it you've got there and making a little Billy, and you could make a dozen of them, with the wood that
I have bought a little block just to make that plane once I get the book.
I think what it teaches you is respect for everything in miniature, and then after that, it's like if you can drive a Ferrari, you can get out and drive anything after that, So it really is testing all the abilities. Now, having said that, it is going to be difficult, and it's not the first thing. You know where I'm going with this. It will teach you the hard way. Personally, I would go for a coffin smoother or even not even coffin shape. It doesn't have to be. I mean, you start off with square. I mean, you know, the coffin smoother that I made is coffin is simply just aesthetics afterwards. But I would make something like the wedge mouth coffin smoother, which you can get every single step on the article collection on the Unplugged Woodworker group and follow them. And if you have any problems, either Richard or myself, we've both been familiar with them, or Bill, obviously, would be more than happy to help you if you're stumbling. But as I mentioned before, the benefit of that is that the wedge mouth allows you error in one direction, but it allows you more of an open mouth format to sort out the front of the mouth later when you put the second wedge in. However, the second wedge is quite complicated to get it tuned in to be absolutely right. So it swings and roundabouts, really. But it does give you that freedom. But I certainly think you would probably benefit from doing one of those two. Or start, you know, looking at existing planes that you've got, like all of the planes, the jacks, the smoothers that you bought, you know, markets and stuff, and look at them and see what nuances, because they all have different, you know, and try and tune one. Try and get an old jack plane that doesn't plane very well, or a smoother that doesn't plane very well, and make it sing. If you go on to my YouTube channel, you'll see I think I took an old jack plane for someone, an old coffin smoother, and I made it perform like it was an infill, because it was just stubbornness more than anything. I was proof that you can do it. Things like, you know, putting a mouth closer on it, inlaying a mouth closer in boxwork, just a little off a sliver. And it was quite a good experience, because it teaches you what things like tuning the wedge to the iron, making sure the bed is flat and coplanar, not skew. All of those things. So if you could take a tool that clearly doesn't work and turn it into one that does work, you're halfway there to actually making one from scratch, because really then it's just a case of removing stock.
Thank you.
And it's cheap.
My second question is, your box with jointer that you made, you used a double iron. I know you've been talking to me recently about just using a single iron as long as the iron's thick enough. What made you decide to use a double iron for that plane rather than using a single iron?
Because when Ollie gave it to me, it had 2 bits to it. That's it. It was a double iron. And I think had it been a single iron, I probably would have used it for something different. Probably I would have used it bevel up, in a bevel up plane. But as a double iron, I used it, you know, straight away as a jointer or a jack, or that would be ideal for that.
Do you think there really is much of a difference as long as the iron's thick enough?
I think having a thick iron, it contributes. Although, you know, some of the earlier mitre planes, as Richard was saying, you know, were very thin irons. They were very thin but hard steel. I think it affects, if the plane is tuned well, it doesn't matter. I think if it's not, it helps. So things like chatter, it's like everything else. If you drive a London bus into a brick wall, it will go straight through it. But if you drive a push bike into a brick wall, you'll probably end up having the bricks going straight through you. So it really is a case of it reduces chatter. It reduces it's more firm. It's a bit like the difference between a Stanley ordinary number 4 and a bedrock number 4. Is that the bedrock is fixed solid to a bedrock, and that's the whole concept of the frog on that, and therefore it's a much better performing plane because inherently it's more solid foundation.
Okay, yeah. Thank you very much.
No problem.
Thank you again for remembering me.
No, it's a pleasure. It gave me content. You always give me content, mate.
I have too many questions.
Even if I'm insulting about your content. I like your table, by the way. I'm really impressed. I'm so glad it's called Jim.
Thank you. No, that was a joke, but I think I will stick with that name now.
Can I have the whitewood called Jim when the Purple Heart
Yeah, okay, fine. The Purple Heart.
Yeah,
will be-
because Alfie's quite happy about having the Purple Heart dog poo color because he's used to seeing that. You see.
All right, the ash can be Jim, and the Purple Heart is Alfie. There you go.
Yeah, he has no taste.
Jim and Alfie, that's the table.
Yeah, don't be surprised if he doesn't chew it when he sees you.
Right, Chester, over to you. Your question.
Yes, Jim, that was delightful. Not just because it's Christmas. I have a couple of things to say to you that are not necessarily questions, but I'll end it with a question. We talked last night, and I told you I'd have a few questions, but we talk so often, and you've helped me so often that you've answered a great many questions that I've had before. So the two things that I wanted to say was, first of all, that it's very interesting to see in your talk, not so much the specifics about the tools, but what it is that inspires you. And I like that you tend to wait for an inspiration on a concept. Somebody will give you something that you're going to make something out of, or for you to make something out of, and you take the time and first acknowledge the gift and understand the depth of the responsibility of the gift, enough that you wait for the inspiration to come to you for the concept that you're going to put it within. The second thing is, I was writing down some feelings that I had, not that I have for you, but feelings that I have for qualities that you possess. And the ones that came very quickly to me was generosity, modesty, loyalty, curiosity, creativity, and ingenuity. And you've shown me all those traits over the years through your generosity to the charity, through your modesty when you give credit to so many, your generosity to me when in making that part for my father's brace, my great-great-grandfather's brace, your creativity in each one of your projects I watch come about, and the ingenuity in that you don't accept projects that are easy for anyone, let alone for you, but you step up to the plate each time and you hit the ball out of the park every time. And I find all of that exceptional. So I want to, as a Christmas present, just give you my feelings towards you and your craft and your ingenuity and my respect. And my question at the end of all of that is, do you have a stamp for the front of your planes with your name?
Yeah, I've got 4 of them, I think, now. The first one was, and I always get them right. Sorry, you forgot one of the traits. It was very, very poor control of my tear glands. That was the other thing that I've got, because I'm just, okay, fine. That's embarrassing publicly.
Jim, it's not embarrassing. Jim, it's not embarrassing. We were in this situation, and literally, I tell you what, it's time whilst you compose yourself, raise the bench beverages, because that was one hell of a blooming toast there. Jim, cheers.
To you, Jim. I appreciate it. I appreciate all that you do.
No, I appreciate it. Thank you. Yes, so to answer your question, I got the first one. I got all of my marks are from Ian Halton at Chalco Stamp and Die. They're not cheap. They are Rolls-Royce. He's an artist. He was on the Channel 4 Time Team program where he created I think a Saxon seal for them for the program to reproduce something that they dug out of the ground that looked like basically had fallen out the bottom of a rabbit, and he turned it into what it was actually, which was a seal from Saxon England. And he's a remarkable man in his abilities. So I've always used him, and so all my marks are from him. And the first one I did was like the Gabriel marks, it's encursed, I think it's called, where you embossed, where you stamp it and the field behind goes back.
Right.
That is beautiful to see. However, it's dreadful for boxwood because you're going to have to move a half a ton of boxwood backwards to get a stamp, and you need something in the region of a fly press, which I've got now. So I will be getting a jig to do that. But I tried it, and I've actually managed to do it in ebony, but it took a hell of a whack. And so from that point on, I got stamps and marks that were all incised, so that they cut into the wood as the letters. And I've got my signature, and I'm going to get some more eventually. But yes, I do.
Well, brilliant. And thanks again for your presentation and for all that you do.
Thanks for embarrassing me, you get.
It's Christmas.
Thank you. Oh, God. Get over that. Nobody else do that, please.
Mitch, over to you. Your turn to make him cry now.
Jim, that was fantastic. I always knew that you were an excellent tool maker, and you certainly demonstrated that with what you've shown tonight. I just wonder if there's something on your bucket list that for some reason you keep putting off because you don't think you're quite skilled enough for yet.
Yeah, I will admit to that. In, I think, the same book that Richard brought back from Florence, I believe, are a pair of dividers that were made for or by Michelangelo. If you Google, I think you'll find Michelangelo dividers. And they are tiny, tiny, tiny. I mean, I'm on a divider kick, but let's say I was using Galileo as a practice because they're that intricate. I think if you were to take two pinheads and put them together, they would be the wing nuts on the dividers, which articulate at that point. And then they have separate arms on them for curved, so you can curve ellipses. And just go look at them. And everything I do, I'm working I try to aim for the stars, and if I end up on the moon, I'm happy. So yeah. if Michelangelo is somewhere in a separate galaxy or even potentially universe, it is a beautiful pair of tools. And so that's on my bucket list. But it's a stepped process of ability to get there. Not the least of which is getting smaller.
Do you think we've lost some of the knowledge from those times?
I will say absolutely, totally, that if anybody embarks on trying to copy anything from the past of anybody, Holtz-Apfel, Galileo, all of the great makers, and you take the simplest of tools, the journey that you will go on when you make that tool will make you realize and see it in a completely different light. If I was to have visited Florence, which sadly I haven't been able to, although there is a young photographer lady out there that I know now, but she said to me, well, come out and have a look, because I think if before I made the Galileo plum square, if I'd gone out there and looked at it in a glass case, I would have said, wow, that's lovely, isn't it? Move on. Whereas now I look at every tool in a glass case at even the slightest nuances. Like I mentioned, the greatest joy out of making that Galileo square was when it folded up. The 2 feet were at 90 degrees. And in order to do that, they've got to be perfect when you're folded. So yes, that's the one. Yes, and that's the size of a little cigarette packet.
Wow.
So yeah. So that, yeah, and also if you look at the hinge, you'll see that it's a knuckle hinge. So that is quite complex in and of itself. And each one of those little wing nuts, what I call the Mickey Mouse tool. This is the Mickey Mouse wing nuts there. Each one of them allows that part to either articulate or separate. And all the accessories there you see were all used in the creation of the cartoons, which were the basic sketches for all of Michelangelo's drawings.
Well, I really hope we're both around long enough to see you do them.
And then you've got to make a leather case for it. So yeah, it's a beautiful thing. So yes, that's the answer to that question. And yes, by looking at that tool from Galileo, I can now see the Michelangelo dividers with a whole new ability. I can see it's possible. It suddenly becomes possible. Maybe, possibly.
Fantastic. Let's hope so.
sort of.
Cheers, Jim. Happy
Cheers,
Christmas.
matey. No problem.
Sean, over to you.
Chris, Jim, an inspiration as always. I have Facebook rigged up so that whenever you post to Unplugged Woodworkers, I can just drop whatever I'm doing and pour over it for a half an hour. So thank you as always. I'll be rewatching tonight more than once. I had one hopefully quick question, which was you mentioned donations to the KT Tools Museum, but I can remember from talking one night, for example, you've got enough Stanley Handyman planes. I know there's specific types of tools you're interested in. Could you let us know what it is you're looking to fill your shelves with?
I don't actively, for the moment, I discourage, if possible, even, unless it's very, very small, but I discourage because I simply haven't got any space. I mean, if I was to swing this around, you'd see a stack of, I've got five English tool chests full of things that haven't been catalogued and sorted yet of my own. From a donating to the museum point of view, people have virtually said, oh, I found this tool, I've got one, or I have no use for it. And therefore, it seems to me that the ideal place would be for other people to benefit, because still the plan is that those people can come and visit, maybe in 2 or 3, maybe with kids and so on, and I can show them quality tools, new and old, and let them use them with impunity, which you can't do in a museum. The other thing I think about museums is the sterility of it. So, with education and with guidance, kids can come along and be really good. I think in Geoffrey's bench talk, he mentioned, why do you have the very best tools? And I think Derek said, well, if you teach somebody to use a good tool, they won't disrespect it. So that's the plan, is to do that. So as far as donations are concerned, at the moment, nothing, except for small things. But generally speaking, my preference, and I'm trying to do this simply because of the size of it, was 18th century and some 19th century tools. So some exceptions are the Holtz Avels, the infill planes, that sort of thing, the exceptional parts of the Industrial Revolution. But anything prior to that, 100%, is what I'm looking at, going back to the 17th century German saw reproduction that we made last year. So, yeah, that's the basic answer to that question.
Awesome. And now you've given me an excuse to come visit. It's for the kids, honey. It's for the kids.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, the kids that have visited have been enthralled. I've had quite a few, probably in double figures now, of visitors that have come across friends, from Unplugged Woodworker mostly, people I used to know in the States when I lived there, people all over the world that have come and just had a play, or even just a touch. I think kids get enthralled by picking up a tool and you say to them, well, that's 300 years old. And they have no concept of 300 years. And more so, they don't have any concept of why it still works and is beautiful 300 years later. And there's very few tools we can say today that if you pop into B&Q, you're going to see in 300 years time, 300 weeks time, 300 minutes time in some cases, I think, probably. But yeah, so that's part of the joy of it, really. And God knows what will happen when the time comes for me to go and speak to Galileo. But yeah, that's the plan anyway for the next couple of years.
Well, that sounds really exciting, and I'm sure with those open offers there, you're going to get a lot of us coming over to have a look and just nosy through the 500 to 600 items. Every time we put you on the spotlight, or we you're on the speaker view on the gallery, you can see what's behind you, and it's just look, what is that? What I think it is, and it's all very, very intriguing. So thank you very much, Jim, for doing this. This is your third talk of the bench talks. So you could say you've done just under 10% of the talks, which is pretty cool stuff. So I'd like everybody to say thank you in the normal way, and to rate the bench beverages, and to toast to Jim and the bench.
Thanks
Jim.
for coming. Thanks, guys.
And I think that, you know, the other parts I wanted to sort of say here is that, you know, I've sort of highlighted there that Jim's done 3 of these. You know, I'd also like to thank Richard, because Richard's done 3 of them as well. And I'd like to thank Derek, who's been, you know, finding the speakers, doing the intros, you know, making it all happen in the background and in the foreground as well. And also, you know, Shrenik to, you know, when I have to go off, Shrenik takes over the reins. So I'd like to say Jim, Richard, Derek, and Shrenik, cheers.
Cheers, guys. Thanks for the support. 33 weeks, eh?
33 weeks.
It's a high-tech conversation.
And a low-tech topic.
Live on the World Wide Web via Zoom. Bench Talk 101.